Chapter 1, The Offer. Rain hammered against the metal roof, loud enough to cover the tension in the air. Saifola Pervez moved through rows of wooden crates, almost invisible in the wet Lahore night. His jacket was soaked, sticking to the weapon under his arm, but he didn't react. He didn't feel the cold or the rain, only focus. His target was ahead, running blindly between shadows. Saif didn't chase in panic. He moved smoothly, quietly, cutting off paths the man didn't even realize he was taking. Every step brought him closer. The server room was cold and artificial, with a faint sharp smell in the air. Kainat Ali sat in front of multiple screens, watching lines of data move non-stop. To most people, it would look like meaningless noise. To her, it made sense. For the past 6 hours, she had been focused on one small detail, something almost invisible in the massive flow of information. A few data packets coming from a secure government network stood out. Not because they were broken, but because they were too perfect. Their timing matched down to the tiniest fraction of a second. Every check was clean. No errors. No randomness. That was the problem. In a system this large, nothing is ever perfect. Anyone else might have ignored it. Called it a glitch and moved on. Kainat didn't. To her, it wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern. And patterns meant someone was there. From his control room, Uzair Hassan watched the port of Lahore like it was a living system. Cranes moved smoothly, trucks followed their routes, and every container was tracked perfectly. Everything was balanced. Everything worked. That's why he noticed it. A small detail, hidden deep in the system logs. One container, marked for agricultural machinery, had briefly shifted direction, just for a second. Toward a military shipping route before snapping back to normal. No alert was triggered. The system fixed itself instantly. But Uzair saw it. It wasn't supposed to happen. In a system this perfect, even a tiny mistake meant something was wrong. The chase ended in a dead-end alley. The target, a low-level courier carrying high-level information, backed into a chain-link fence, panic all over his face. He had nowhere left to go. Saif stepped forward slowly. He didn't pull his weapon. He didn't need to. The calm in his eyes was enough. Before the man could react, Saif grabbed his arm. A sharp movement. A crack. The courier let out a choked gasp and dropped to his knees, clutching his wrist. The drive, Saif said quietly. The man nodded quickly, shaking, and pulled a small waterproof data chip from his pocket. Saif took it without a word. Then the courier's burner phone buzzed. Still in his hand, the screen lit up with a new message, just a set of coordinates. Saif glanced at it. He had what he came for. But this wasn't part of the mission. Kainat isolated the strange data packets and moved them into a secure virtual system. Step by step, she removed the layers of encryption. There was nothing inside. No virus. No stolen data. No hidden file. Just the pattern. She stared at it again, the timing, the spacing, the rhythm. This wasn't normal code. It was something else. She ran a different kind of analysis, converting the sequence, not into text, but into location data. A result appeared. Not global coordinates. Something local. Very specific. A shelf number inside the Punjab Public Library's main research archive. Kainat leaned back slightly, her eyes narrowing. This wasn't random. It was a message. Hidden carefully, meant for someone who knew how to look. Uzair tracked the strange log entry through the system. Whoever made the change had tried to erase their path completely. Most of it was gone. But not all. Small fragments remained, broken pieces of code left behind in the server's error logs. He pulled them together. At first, it looked useless. Corrupted. Incomplete. But Uzair wasn't looking for clean data. He was looking for meaning. He ignored the broken parts and focused on the structure. The intent. And then he saw it. One part of the code wasn't damaged at all. It stood out. Clean. Deliberate. It wasn't a command. It was a time. And a location. A specific bench in Bagijina. Uzair stared at the screen for a moment. Someone had left a message inside his system. The next day, the air in the small, quiet cafe was thick with the smell of cardamom and roasted coffee. Saif sat at a corner table, his back to the wall. He had come alone. A man in a simple, well-fitted suit approached, his movements fluid, his presence unremarkable. He slid into the opposite chair without an invitation. "Mr. Pervez," the man said, his voice level. He placed a thin, metallic tablet between them. "You have been shortlisted." In the quiet archive of Punjab Public Library, Kainat found the shelf. A woman stood there, calmly placing a book back into position. She paused and looked at Kainat, her expression unreadable. "You were difficult to reach, Ms. Ali," she said softly, placing a tablet identical to Saif's on the shelf. "An opportunity has presented itself. From a company called Star Industries." Uzair sat on a park bench in Bagijina, watching people pass by. Families. Children. Normal life. A man sat down beside him, leaving a respectable distance. He didn't look at Uzair, but spoke towards the horizon. "People who notice flaws are rare, Mr. Hassan." He placed the same model of tablet on the bench between them. "This is an off-record conversation. Once you accept, the old rules no longer apply." Each representative delivered the final part of their message with the same dispassionate finality. "A car will be at your primary residence in 24 hours. Be in it. The offer will not be repeated." Then they were gone, melting back into the city. Saif, Kainat, and Uzair, alone in 3 separate locations, each looked down at the tablet. They powered it on. The screen glowed, displaying not a contract or a welcome message, but a single, password-protected file. Instinctively, each of them typed in their own service identification number. The file unlocked. It was a dossier. Their own. Not the official, sanitized version, but the real one. It contained every classified mission, every erased surveillance operation. It detailed skills and psychological evaluations known only to a handful of their handlers. And at the very end of the file, below a line of stark red text that read "Candidate Profile, Accepted," was a completed application form for a senior security position at Star Industries. A cold certainty washed over each of them. Their heart rates didn't rise. Their breathing didn't catch. There was only the chilling, silent realization that settled deep in their bones. They had never applied. This wasn't an offer. It was a summons. They hadn't been chosen. They had been claimed.